A strong character is one that is complex because people are complex. And it's involves like growth and character development, unique character traits, an in-depth story, and ultimately being a person, a complex, layered person. And you just have to apply those traits to a woman, and then you have a strong woman character. And strong characters don't necessarily have to be good. They can be villainous. They could be, I don't know, like smart to not so smart. All of this whole range will make a strong character.
Well, I like
Um,
that definition a lot because what I see in especially a lot of my high school students that I work with is when they do character design, there's a lot of time spent on what the character looks like. And I
mhm,
don't tend to see a lot of time invested into the development of the personality and their background. And I really wish that people would spend more time on that because really, who cares if the character looks cool if we
mm.
don't empathize with them?
Right, absolutely. I agree. I will also say that appearance does matter as well, and we will talk about it a little bit more. But ultimately, you're interested in this character kind of as a person and who they are. So it's the things that you don't see that really make a person alive and a strong character. And I think the first thing we should tackle is just women in media in general and how we aren't as there's not a lot of exposure to just like women characters in general. In fact, there is a whole test dedicated around this phenomenon called the Bechdel test. And if anyone knows what the Bechdel test is, just say yes, you know, because it seems more known with the younger generations than the older generations
I
of
don't
people.
know.
Like Clara, yeah, Clara didn't know the Bechdel test, but I was like, Clara, how could you
I'm
not know the
old. I
Bechdel?
don't know these things.
Well, ultimately, the Bechdel test is very simple, yet a lot of things don't pass it. So it's made of three rules. The first rule is that do you have more than one woman character in this film, novel, story, etc.? Two, do they talk to each other? And three, is the conversation about something other than a man? And if it passes these three simple rules, it passes the Bechdel test. But you'd be surprised how many things don't pass that test. And not that I'm saying that this is an ultimate test for everything, like this is good or bad. No, I mean like Forrest Gump does not pass the Bechdel test, and I love Forrest Gump. So it's just really a test to make you be a little bit more aware about, representation of women in media. And what's actually interesting about the Bechdel test is when I was looking it up, I realized that people have made more and more tests that are more nuanced to find not only like women in media, but like minorities, people of color, etc. And there's one test actually pertaining to women characters that's really interesting to me called the Mako Mori test. And Mako Mori is this character from Pacific Rim 2 who literally dies in the first few minutes of the film in order to further her brother's story. So ultimately, the Mako Mori test is something that determines does this woman character drive a man story or is she a strong character in herself?
Well, I'd love to
Yeah.
hear from those of you who are watching in the chat. Hello, Tammy and Blue Ren. Who are your favorite badass women characters in movies, in animated films, in comics? Whoever you guys want to come up with, because trust me, we've got an awesome list for all of you. But I think it's really nice to hear from all of you who your favorites are. And hello, 10,000 Crows. So, Kat, who are we going to start with?
So first, we're going to start with some stereotypes that I've seen in film and media, just to let people be a little bit more aware about what they're seeing all the time. So I think there's so many stereotypes associated with women in general, just like this feminine, meek, and if you're older, a matronly or motherly kind of woman character. Also, a thin, fit, and pretty kind of character as well is something that we just see all the time. And there are also specific like titles that we actually give stereotypes that we see in media, such as a damsel in distress or the Smurfette principle. And so first we're going to look at Smurfette from the Smurfs as the first example of maybe not a great woman character. The Smurfette principle. Clara, have you ever heard of the Smurfette principle?
I have not heard of the Smurfette principle. However, I grew up watching the Smurfs, and oh
Mm,
my gosh, the number of hours I logged watching this cartoon when I was growing up, It's really upsetting. And the thing is, when you're a little kid, you're 6 years old, you don't realize and stop and say, that's a little creepy that there's one
Mm,
woman who lives with 500 men. There's something a little messed up about that. You just accept
yeah,
it. And I think the thing that a lot of people need to keep in mind is how influential these cartoons are on younger kids, that you're absorbing these, I guess, examples really early on, and they really do affect you a lot.
right. Well, ultimately, to sum up the Smurfette principle, it's just the one token woman character in a group of men. And that's literally what Smurfette is. And usually it's a stereotype and just like a bimbo. Like she doesn't provide anything for the storyline. She's there for the sake of just, we need a woman, let's put one there. Just love interest,
It's
whatever.
always bothered me
Um,
also that she's blonde, because actually my
yeah.
daughters, who are half Chinese and both have sort of darkish brown hair, my daughter actually said to me, she's 10 years old, she's like, how come the pretty women always are blonde in movies? Like, she's already picked
Right.
that up and she's only 10 years old.
Right. She's very aware, Clara. But anyways, that's the Smurfette principle. Another one is one I stated before, Mako Mori, which is just a female character who exists just to drive a man's story. And like another stereotype I see is just like a husband whose wife is killed and he's out for revenge. So it's all driving the man's story. Or a father whose daughter has been kidnapped and the father has to go on this huge journey to get his daughter back. And it's just like these women are just props to further a man's
Isn't
story,
that
which
every
is pretty
single Liam Neeson movie, basically?
it is. And well, let's move on. But anyways, there are these very I guess it's very noticeable. Hopefully, it's very noticeable that these women characters are just there as props. But sometimes other characters in wonderful movies exist, and they're not. I guess they're not ideal characters either, such as Caravaggio the Sorceress from Kirikou and the Sorceress. And I don't know if you know this film, Clara, but it's gorgeous. This is my one of my favorite
I've
films. Do you
never
know
seen
it?
this film before, but I was looking at some of the stills, and I mean, some of the scenes look so just sumptuous. I mean, this one scene of these two figures in this blue, purpley green forest is just, I mean, it looks like a painting.
Yeah, absolutely gorgeous film. Wonderful story. Sorry, wonderful story. I love that film, but Carava the Sorceress does not get a good end. Um, I won't spoil too much, but if you're watching this film, just be aware how many times she speaks throughout the film. And at first, she's like the villain. Of course, she's going to have a great speaking role in the film, but in the end, just notice how silent she is and how much the man just talks over her and stuff like that. And I was just so frustrated to see that because she's half of the movie. She is what makes the whole movie is about going against Caraba the sorceress. And she's such a wonderful character too, like visually appealing as well and strong. But in the end, they just sort of like downplay her story. And I won't spoil it. It's a gorgeous film though.
That's so
Everyone should
interesting,
definitely
because
see it.
I don't know anything about this film. I just looked at the stills that you sent me, and my first impression looking at the stills was, wow, she looks awesome. I want to get to know
Right.
this character. And knowing that this
Yeah.
was about badass women, I was like, oh, she must be like one of Kat's prime examples. And now you're telling me that she's totally underused in the movie. That's like a real bummer, because the design is really striking and she's got this
Mm.
very intense facial expression, and I just love the silhouette of the hair. So that's just
Right.
such a bummer to hear that. I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
watch the film later.
Yeah. I mean, she's such a great character. I like this is such a side note, but one of my favorite singers named Fatoumata Diawara actually plays her in a musical. I'm like, yes, two really strong women. However, Karaba the Sorceress does not really get a good end. But anyways, let's actually move on to some actual other characters in history and also in the present. And I just wanted to highlight that, I mean, women are people. We've existed for a very long
We've been
time.
around a while.
As yeah, we've been here a while. So, of course, there are some really good women characters in history. And I think the first example I want to pull up is Hindu goddesses like Durga and Parvati. Now, Durga is the Hindu goddess of war, and Parvati is the opposite of Durga, but they're the same goddess. They're just different forms of the goddess. Parvati is the goddess of love, fertility, marriage, etc. And I feel like that in itself is a woman stereotype, Parvati. However, I would argue that both Durga and Parvati are strong characters because, there are women who exist who are feminine and motherly, like they're real. And there's nothing wrong with portraying a motherly woman. Or a woman who's just, a goddess of love and marriage. But it's really good to also have the flip side, and Durga is sort of the foil of Parvati. She's like this badass woman with like so many arms, and each arm holds a weapon, and she slays this boar demon over and over again.
I want to be her.
Actually, funny story, I had a friend named Lakshmi, who is, Lakshmi is another form of the goddess Parvati. And when she was little, her father was like, "Oh, I want you to be Durga, but your mother wanted me to name you Lakshmi." So...
Let's see. 10,000 Crows saying Uma Thurman in Kill Bill. Oh, that's a good character. Although I could not watch that movie. That scene when she's stuck in the coffin, that made me ill. For those of you who have seen Kill Bill, Tammy Dreiger had a full Smurf collection. You know something, Tammy? I did not have that Smurf collection, but I was very jealous of all the other kids that had their little plastic Smurfs. I did not have that collection. And Aiden James is saying Motoko Kusanagi from Ghost in the Shell. You probably know what that is, Kat. I feel like that's the movie where they hired Scarlett Johansson to play an Asian woman.
Amazing, yeah.
Yeah, because,
exactly,
there's no other Asian women available.
Right. You see this forced smile?
Yep.
Yeah. But anyways, yeah, I would agree Motoko from Ghost in the Shell is definitely a great woman character. I'm so glad that people are watching these films. I just love anime. Because, okay, anyways, let's move on to the next paintings that we have, and it's Judith beheading Holofernes. And, well, I mean, this is a woman who's really taking action into her own hands. If you guys don't know the tale of Judith and Holofernes is, part of the army or something, the general, and he's about to conquer Judith's city. And what Judith does is trick Holofernes into letting her into his tent for pleasure, presumably. But she beheads him and then carries his head out in a basket. And I think actually what's really interesting about these paintings is we have one by Caravaggio, and the other one we have one by Gentileschi, Artemisia Gentileschi. Now, Artemisia is a woman and Caravaggio is a man. And just look at the differences between the two paintings. The Caravaggio painting, Judith looks really disgusted with the act, and she's not putting any power into slicing this head off. Slicing a head off is really hard. And
you would know that, right, Kat?
No, no. And in the Artemisia Gentileschi painting, she's really just going all in and like sinking that sword into the man's neck.
Well, I feel like the Caravaggio painting, the female character, she almost looks like she's posing like a mannequin. Like she feels extremely stiff, and she doesn't look that confident either. Like she actually, if you look at her facial expression, she's a little bit hesitant. Like she's not fully into the gesture the way that she is in the Artemisia Gentileschi version.
Right. Another thing I want to point out that I love in the Artemisia Gentileschi version is that the handmaiden is actually cooperating with with Judith, because it's so hard. Like, this passes the Bechdel test. This painting passes the Bechdel test.
Why wouldn't you have your handmaid help out? You need somebody to hold the neck steady so you can get your sword in there.
And it's just, something I've noticed in a lot of media is that a lot of women characters don't help each other out. They are not very friends. They're pitted against each other a lot of the times too. Yeah.
A lot of it's about jealousy, like that stupid Julia Roberts movie, My Best Friend's Wedding. She's so jealous of her friend getting married. It's just like, come on. Oh, we got a great comment from Panda Steph. Beheads man. Mom, am I doing it right? Fabulous. I love it.
Yeah. And the mom's just cheering in the background. Cut it off. Okay, sorry. But anyways, I mean, strong women characters don't always have to be against men. No, not all men are bad. Not all men.
Some
Sorry.
of them are okay,
But
you know.
yeah, some of them are okay. But it's just that there are a lot of the nuances in Artemisia Gentileschi's painting that really make it a lot stronger. Like this is a very believable woman cutting off a head. It takes a lot of force to do that. And here's another woman helping her out because yeah, this man's huge. You're gonna need a little bit of legwork to help behead him. I mean, moving on, another good example of a strong woman character is Scheherazade, from A Thousand and One Nights. If does anyone know A Thousand and One? Everyone knows A Thousand and One Nights, right?
Well, it's the Arabian Nights, right?
Yeah, it
Mm-hmm.
is. It's a very famous collection of stories, and the premise is that Scheherazade tells one story to the king every night and always leaves it at a cliffhanger so that he won't kill her. And he's always waiting for the next story. Now, again, this story kind of revolves around a man again, but that's fine. I mean, sometimes you need another foil character. But what really makes Scheherazade strong is that she's clever. I mean, she's thinking on her feet. She's totally doing it by herself, and also the help of her sister, if you know the story a bit more. And a lot of it has to do with agency with a woman character. Like, is she doing it out of her own strength, out of her own willpower? And it's not to serve anyone else. It's mostly for oneself or one's own desires, right?
Well, I also like that she's really relying on her wits because we just looked at a
Right.
representation that was very much about a physical attack. And I think it
Mm,
shows that it doesn't have to be a fight all the time. Like, it can definitely
mm.
be, well, for those of us who are old and love The Princess Bride, it's that battle of wits, right? It's like using your mental brain power to protect yourself.
Right. Another thing I want to point out with all these historical examples I'm pulling up are that these are women who are of very different origins. And they're all women of color, except for Judith, I guess. But just knowing that there's a whole range of women out there who could, who are people, who can make very good characters, that will drive a good character. Just specificity and knowledge of diversity and representation.
Right.
But anyways, let's move
Specificity, I
on.
think, is one of the things that I don't see students doing enough, just in general. I'm not even just talking about character design. I'm talking about when I teach drawing, when I teach painting. I mean, here's an example. Like the other day, my daughter, she loves doing character design. She's 10 years old, okay? She did this drawing of a little kid wearing a hoodie and pants. And I said to her, well, why don't you put like an icon on the hoodie? Because a lot of hoodies are not plain. Usually they have some logo on them. And I was like,
Right.
well, you always wear polka dot pants. Why don't you draw polka dots on the pants? And it's like just those two things, the logo on the hoodie and the polka dot pants, already strengthen that character. So that character didn't look so generic because who doesn't wear a hoodie and pants? I mean, that's not like
Right.
new. So that specificity is really important. 10,000
Yeah.
Crows is saying, do you guys know the artist Kristen Liu Huang? She makes really awesome paintings of badass women. Tammy Dreiger is saying, Kat, awesome point. It's great to be a strong and motherly woman. Absolutely. Yeah, because you
Mm.
gotta, kick some butt when you're a mom. And Panda
I
Stuff is
don't know
saying, the art world is the only world where logos don't exist.
if
All right, so Kat, you've got some examples from some animated films. Let's dig into some of those.
Right. So the first one I want to pull up is Helga Sinclair from the Atlantis, The Lost Empire. Does anyone know this? This is sort of like a lesser known Disney film, but it's a very strong film.
I've never heard of
And
it, honestly.
it's such a good film. And I want to add that the whole team of characters are extremely diverse, like in terms of gender, age, like ethnicity. They're very diverse. And I'm just so disappointed that the film
Isn't
isn't
it sort
more
of
known.
unusual for a Disney film to have such a broad demographic of people in a single movie?
Exactly. Right. Yeah. And they even speak different languages in that film too. So,
Well,
whatever.
because I feel like a
Anyway,
lot of Disney films are very specific in that it's like, okay, we're doing Mulan, it's all Chinese people. We're doing
right.
this character, it's all people in France. Like, you don't usually see that diversity in a single film.
Yeah. Anyways, Atlantis, The Lost Empire is a breath of fresh air. Everyone should watch that film. But the character I want to draw attention to is Helga Sinclair, who is a minor character actually in the film. She's not a main character, but she's a strong character. So first of all, I want to point out that she can fight.
Always helps.
So yeah, that always helps. But not only that, she's can be feminine as well. Like in the first picture you showed where she's in that dress ball gown kind of situation, which can show that, you know, you can be badass with muscles and fight and you can still be sexy. And that just makes Helga such an appealing character because I don't think she's made just for the male gaze. I think she's there to be a badass woman, you know? And additionally, she does provide a lot of change in the film itself, in the story, and a lot of the agency is in her own hands and her decision, what she wants to do. But I won't spoil this film, so everyone should go watch it and take note of Helga Sinclair. Another thing I want to mention with Helga is that her body is very realistic. Like, she has muscles, she has those broad shoulders, and she doesn't have, like, a puny, teeny, tiny waist that is smaller than her head.
Gigantic breasts, right?
Right. But anyways, let's move on to another character called Mima Kirikou from Perfect Blue. Now, Perfect Blue is a film by Satoshi Kon, who's a genius, and everyone should watch Perfect Blue, but it's for adult audiences. There are some very mature and triggering themes in that film. But what's so great about this character to me is that Mima is a pop idol in Japan. She's literally made for the male gaze. And in fact, there's a photo that I included of a shot of Mima dancing on stage in her costume, and like there's a hand going out and she's like dancing sort of in the hand. And her whole job is to be eye candy for men. But this film is actually based upon her experiences trying to break out of that mold and rediscover herself in a different career path. And it's such a complex film. Everyone should watch it. Mm-hmm. But
Clara, I hope I find in a lot of character designs is I feel like you only get one version of the character, because one thing that I notice that I do, I always feel like I adjust myself depending on who I'm with, if that makes any sense. Like when I'm around my students in a classroom, that is one version of me. When I'm hanging out with my kids, that's another version of me. In fact, my kids have been telling me, they're like, why are you talking in your weird art prof voice? Because they recognize how different I sound when I'm on video and when I'm talking to students and everything. And I wish that more character designs would show that there's more sides to a person than just being, oh, you're eye candy for men. That's it. You can't be anything else. And so this is a great example of that maybe that is what you are technically speaking, but that actually there's another side of you that's trying to do something with that.
Right. And yeah, Mima Kirikou from Perfect Blue is a perfect example of that. Everyone should watch this film once you're old enough. But let's move on to some kids' films. I hope everyone here has heard of Hayao Miyazaki, but he's such a wonderful director of Studio Ghibli who made the film Spirited Away. And in Spirited Away, there are two characters I want to draw attention to. Chihiro, who is the little girl, and Yubaba, who's the much older woman. And I think this is such a great they're such a great foil. Like Chihiro is this small, skinny, kind of plain little girl, and Yubaba is this like huge head, a really old woman who's got this fiery, tempestuous personality.
Who has seen Spirited Away? Let us know in the chat. Do you like it? It's actually, for me, it's my favorite of all of his films, which is saying a lot because I love Miyazaki films. I think they're all incredible, but there's something very special about this one. I just feel like it's full of a lot of metaphors. I don't know that I could explain what they all are, but I just get the feeling that there's a lot of metaphors in there.
Right. It's just incredibly imaginative, too. And just so everyone knows, Chihiro and Yubaba are not the only strong woman characters in this film. This film has a host of strong characters and creatures as well. So definitely check out the film. But I want to say that these two characters go through very different growths throughout the film. Chihiro, when I first saw this film, I saw it when I was like 11 or 10, when it first came out, basically. And I remember distinctly thinking, I don't like Chihiro
But she's
because
a
she's
little whiny at
annoying
first, isn't she?
and she's whiny. Yeah, she's very whiny. She complains and she seems like annoying. But then as she goes through the film, she grows. And I think that's something that's so appealing in a character is character development, like witnessing a character learn from something and change because of that. And I remember as like a 10-year-old watching the end of the film, I'm like, I love Chihiro. Chihiro is great now. And I guess I also saw myself in Chihiro because I was like, I'm a whiny little kid. Maybe one day I can grow up to be as brave and conscientious as
Because
Chihiro
people turned
does.
your parents into pigs, right? That's exactly.
That'll help. That'll speed the process.
Well,
For those
I'm
of you
really
who
glad
don't
you
know,
brought up the granny character because I've done a lot of work. Like, for example, a couple years ago, I started this series about elderly figures, and actually, some of my own studio practice right now deals with these themes of aging from my point of view. So I think about this a lot. And I think actually the same thing goes with art history that you just don't see images of elderly women. You just don't. I can think of like two sculptures. There's one from Hellenistic Greece called the Old Market Woman, and there's one by Rodin, the sculptor, called the Helmet Maker's Wife. And then everybody else is like 35 and below in all of art history. And it's really astounding when you stop and think about it, but I think a lot of people don't, unfortunately.
It's kind of like when a woman gets older, she just disappears. Like no one really
Although,
cares,
you know something, I've been reading a lot of articles that are about older women because I just feel like there's a little bit more visibility about it. But actually, a lot of the older women are like, it's awesome. I love being invisible. Nobody bothers me. Which I think is a great take as well. I mean, I never thought about it that way, but
Yeah. But there's just like so much potential in that area to make a great character. There aren't a lot of those characters in the first place, so if you make one, it's going to be memorable, especially if you're Yubaba.
well, and that also
But
brings us
anyway,
to the other Miyazaki film that we were going to talk about, which is Howl's Moving Castle. I saw this
right.
film a really long time ago, so Kat, I'm going to rely on you to give a summary.
Sure. So what happens is a girl named Sophie gets cursed by the Witch of the Waste to turn into a 90-year-old woman. So she turned from 19 to 90 years old. And she journeys to undo the curse. And in her journeys, she meets Howl, who is the owner of Howl's Moving Castle. He's a wizard, and he's a very powerful wizard. And they have a bunch of adventures together. But the photos that we're focusing on in this stream are on the Witch of the Waste. The Witch of the Waste goes through many transformations. At first, she is this big, voluptuous, quite fat lady, and then eventually she gets she has to climb these stairs, and she really deteriorates into this really old, wrinkly woman. And I want everyone to notice that the Witch of the Waste, as an old woman, looks very different from Yubaba and Spirited Away. Even though they're both old women, they are very different people.
Well, if you
And they
look at
look
their
very
silhouette of just their heads alone, they're not even
yeah.
remotely the same. And I think that's another thing I see in character design where it's like, oh, all older women wear this, and all older women do their hair like this. And it's like, that's so not true. In fact, there's this whole, I guess, movement of older women on Instagram who are like strutting their stuff in terms of fashion because there's that really stupid phrase people used to say for a while, which was like, what was it? Wear what your age is or something, or like when you hit a certain age, there are certain things you cannot wear. And there's just a lot of women who are just busting that open, which is great.
Mm. But yeah, so representation in women. Older women exist too, younger girls exist too, like Chihiro, as I mentioned before. But I also want to point out that another interesting design choice for the Witch of the Waste in her younger self is her size. Like, yes, women are fat too, you know? And that's a very real thing. And real people experience this and have this body type. And, you know, like, you have male characters, like, you have Danny DeVito. Like, why can't we have a female Danny DeVito?
That's not necessarily just their as comic relief, because you see that a lot in
Yeah,
Hollywood. Like, you guys in the chat,
exactly.
tell me when's the last time you saw a character in a movie who was larger, who wasn't there because they were larger, who was just happened to be there, right? It's
Right.
like so much of the time they're there to be the butt of a joke. And
Yeah.
it's like, why can't they just be there?
Right. Actually, I had a lot of trouble trying to find heavier women in characters, and I actually had to reach out to my friends like, you gotta help me because it's so hard. I was so tempted to just like go through Rebel Wilson, is that her name, the actress? Um, her Wikipedia page is like, let's find the one film that she's in where she's not a joke, you know? And right, like she really rose to fame from Pitch Perfect, right? Pitch Perfect. And she was literally called like Fat Amy in the series, and she was literally just a joke the whole time. And I was like, let's find one that is respectful and just is very plain, like matter of fact, like fat women exist. And the ones that people showed me are Zephyr, who's from the Valiant comics. And Zephyr is a superhero who gains the ability to fly. And this is her body type is one that you see very often. It's a very universal, not very universal, like it's a very real experience for many people.
Mm-hmm.
Clara, what do you think about this comic?
Well, I mean, I was really surprised when you showed it to me, because I feel like you said, you don't like the whole stereotype of a female superhero is that she's wearing slinky clothes where her breasts are falling out. She's got a waist that's like a size -10, and her breasts are like bigger than her face. And so I feel
Yeah,
like this character that we're looking at, she's everything that those superheroes are not. I mean, she looks like a real person, right? I mean, I
right.
don't know if you guys have been reading some of the news on Victoria's Secret, but Victoria's Secret a really long time ago used to be like this huge lingerie brand and everybody bought from them, but they said that now they're going down the tubes because their whole PR campaign has been about making lingerie to please men. And so there are all these new lingerie companies, like there's this one called Third Love. And if you look at their photos of the women in the lingerie, they look like regular women. There's people of color. There are people that are a size 14, people that are a size 8. And if you look at Victoria's Secret, it's like, what percentage of the population looks like that? It's just really frightening. Blue Wren is saying in the chat, to date, the strongest and most complex female characters have been in sci-fi. Starbuck and every other woman in the remake of Battlestar Galactica, Iva Nova in B5. You know something? Here's the funny thing about sci-fi. I don't mind sci-fi. It's not that I don't like it or anything, but my husband is so into sci-fi. So I end up peripherally watching every single new sci-fi TV show that comes out. So I sort of know who you're talking about a little bit. And let's see, Delenn in Babylon 5, any number of female characters in the various iterations of Star Trek with the Duras sisters is a standout. And Tammy is saying, Liv Tyler is a cool actress and not tiny. I thought she was tiny. Maybe things have changed and I haven't read People magazine in a while. I don't know.
Hmm,
But anyway, it's great
right.
to see Zephyr because I have never seen a superhero like this before. I mean, this really feels like a total anomaly in the comics world.
Yeah. I actually thought I knew a good amount about comics, but I actually didn't know about Zephyr until someone pointed it out to me. And I was like, dang, like, why didn't I see this earlier? This is such good representation and probably a more interesting story, honestly, than like Superman. You didn't hear that from me. But anyways, I want to point out another kids show that's been doing really huge strides in representation and diversity, and that's Steven Universe. Has anyone here actually watched Steven
I've
Universe?
never seen
Um,
this TV show before. My kids don't watch it. My
you
kids are
have
obsessed with
not.
Adventure Time. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. I mean, Steven Universe is a very different like flavor than Adventure Time. Like your kids are kind of wacky, Clara. I can see that they like,
Wacky
you
and
know.
proud.
But anyways, Steven Universe is this whole host of amazing female characters. Like female characters of all sizes, shapes, females who also are very different in personality as well. And particularly, I want to show the three main characters who are Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl. And just these three women, like, look how different they are. Like, one's short, tall, skinny, round, curvaceous. Like, oh my gosh, like, women's bodies come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. And it's good to see that in media. And also, that makes them more memorable because no one ever looks completely the same as someone else. Plus, they're very different characters as well. Pearl, I think, is like a very fastidious, very nitpicky kind of personality. Amethyst is just like, whatever. And like that's her personality. It's like, I'm good with everything. And Garnet is a stoic, very quiet character, but every time she says something, it's like gold. Like
You know
she's a
something?
very
I've
wise.
never seen this show, but I can tell
Mhm.
from looking at this still that Garnet is a stoic character. Like I can see
Yeah.
it in terms of the posture of the character because I feel like that's really well, so I'm no character design expert by any means. I mean, I know like 0.01% of what Kat knows. But the two things that I do look for when I look at character design is I always look at the posture of the figure because what I see a lot in my students' work is that everybody has the same posture, which is upright. And it's like not everybody stands that way. I mean, I saw this woman once when I was visiting Taiwan. She was so small, and I mean, she practically walked as if she was picking up a penny off the sidewalk. Her slouch was that severe. And I also look at silhouette. And if you look at the silhouette of these three figures, they're nowhere near close to each other. I mean, the one in the middle is almost like a round sphere. The one on the right almost looks like a power tool or something. I don't know. They're just so much in contrast to each other. And I think that's very important because a lot of characters do exist within a particular group of characters or a certain world. And when everybody looks the
Mm.
same, it's just really artificial when you think about it.
Yeah, completely agree. Steven Universe, very good watch. Clara, you should have your kids watch
I
Steven
should,
Universe.
if I can get them to ever stop watching Adventure Time.
I mean, Adventure
Anyway,
Time is always.
I hope you guys will explore our other related videos on character design, and that if you would like to continue to grow as an artist, that you will subscribe to our YouTube channel and ring the bell to make sure you don't miss out on anything. And thank you so much to our top Patreon supporters who make Art Prof possible. You guys are fantastic. Thank you to all of you who chimed in, told us about your favorite characters. We will see you all next time. Bye.